Welcome again to another episode of Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi. I am so excited today. I'm speaking to Adam Craker, who is the CEO of IQ Business, which is the largest independent management consulting firm. I met you, Adam, a few years ago.
Yes.
When I was introduced to you by Wendy Lucas-Bull.
That's right.
What a privilege. And I've enjoyed our meetings ever since.
Well, the privilege was all mine.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to chat today. I met you as an adult, so I'm going to try and reverse and find out what was your upbringing like. Do you have siblings? Where did you grow up? And what did you do for your pastimes?
Well, I'm still an adult at this stage,
Yes, you are.
becoming even more. But I was born and bred in the UK, in London, and one of four children in a family that perhaps my start to life was not the most ideal. My father passed away in his 30s, early 30s,
Wow.
and my mother passed away in her early 40s. So I was 8 when my father passed away and 17 when my mother passed. So not the best of starts, but my 3 siblings are involved in all sorts of things in the UK and Europe, and we see each other from time to time.
Yeah, they've never thought of coming down to the continent.
Well, they do. In fact, my oldest brother
Yeah.
has never been, and
Yeah.
I've been here now for 22 years, and so that's
Yeah.
I'll send a message to him. I often do.
You're
I've
almost
even-
as old as our democracy.
Well, exactly.
In South Africa.
Yeah, there
yeah?
you are. There you are.
Why did you choose to live in South Africa? I mean, for myself, I know when I'm outside of South Africa and the continent, I always feel like I'm not at home because when I look around, nobody looks like me. But what makes you feel home in Africa, and what has your experience been like?
Well, what led Dudu to me deciding to come to South Africa was that I was studying in Switzerland. I was actually doing my MBA, and I made great friends with a South African that was also there. And
Good show. Who was
very
that?
good. A guy called Norman Jones.
Thank you, Norman Jones.
And he
Yeah.
and I embarked on an exploration for the first time in 1996 when I came down to South Africa. And 2 years after the first democratic elections, there was a great deal of uncertainty, but I really loved the atmosphere of what was happening. And strangely enough, I had met my wife several years earlier. We weren't married at that stage.
Yeah.
We got married the first year we came here.
Oh.
But we had met in the Nelson Mandela Bar at the University of Warwick.
Signs everywhere, isn't
There
it?
is, there's
Yeah.
signs.
Yeah.
And then also, strangely enough, when we got engaged, and we had quite a long courtship
Yes.
of 10 years, I had to be certain. When we got
I
engaged...
thought people know the first time they meet someone.
Well, yeah, you do. But we
Yeah.
decided to go to London to go and buy an engagement ring. And the day that we arrived in London at Charing Cross Station, we walked out and there were crowds of people. We didn't really know what was going on. We followed the crowd. In fact, the crowd picked us up literally
Yeah.
and took us down. And we ended up in Trafalgar Square, standing outside of South Africa House.
Yes.
And who walks out of South Africa House onto the balcony?
Not our
but-
Madiba.
He did. And there we were looking up,
Yeah.
straight up his nostrils.
Wow.
And that was another sign. And we said, well, I think it's time.
This is
We
it.
should come and have an experience that we thought would only be for 2 or 3 years, but now is 22. So I've completely overstayed my welcome by this
No, we
stage.
still enjoy having you. You're a great value to us. What do you think your unique value proposition is, especially when you're not in an own country?
Yeah.
I think some of those distinctiveness are even more pronounced. What do you think makes you memorable and impactful in spaces?
It's a very interesting question because I guess I only started to think about that as I've matured or got a little bit older.
Yeah.
As I was 49, about to turn 50, I began to think about my own personal purpose
Yeah.
and why am I here and what has led me to this point. And I went all the way back to my childhood to really think through those formative years and the pressures or the challenges that I faced and the adversity that I faced. and how my life has really meandered through various experiences. And I came up with a view that because of my nature, because of my approach to things, I tend to be quite an optimistic person. But I believe my unique value proposition is that I can help others face adversity and think creatively about how to react to that adversity.
Yeah.
And I've really, I think, harnessed my own energy around that, and that's really that's what I do. So I focus on helping in an organisation like IQ Business. Invariably, our clients are facing adversity on a day-to-day basis, and they need individuals and teams to be able to help them through that.
Yeah. Which is a perfect segue to asking this. What have you learned about the human spirit, having lost your parents at such a young age? You know, what has helped you to survive and thrive?
Well, there are particular individuals in my life that I can think back to. My grandparents, for example, played a really pivotal role in my life with my parents not there. And then individuals that, from a business perspective and from a school perspective, firstly, that really were pivotal in my life, that gave me direction, which might have involved using their foot to plant it up my backside on several occasions.
Because you were out of order.
I was out of order, or I think as a youngster, sometimes we can perhaps play to the situation or use the situation as an excuse. And it was only when I got to university that I really understood how to learn. And as I've subsequently found, my tendency is to be very ADHD, and I had to really harness my own learning method and approach. But the people along the way, in particular at a very early stage, I was very fortunate to receive an internship from quite a significant company in the UK, who didn't, I think, take charity, or didn't have a perspective that here's this orphaned youngster, but they saw potential. And they saw more potential than perhaps I actually had an appreciation of. And
you
they
sometimes need that, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that human spirit of having an individual or an executive in a company provide you with a hand up to basically get into a working environment was really, really pivotal in my life at an early stage.
Yeah. Because obviously we understand, being South African, the majority of us as African people, what we've been through. How do you have that conversation with somebody when their circumstances seem to be so overwhelming to not see themselves as a victim? Because sometimes we give ourselves an excuse and we're always pointing at somebody else. And in South Africa, we're most likely to point at white people and white privilege. What conversation can you have with somebody that you can draw from your own experience to say, look, I was an orphan, but they will still say, gosh, you still got white privilege. You know, how would you counteract that?
Well, my situation, I think even today in the UK, for example, is relatively unusual. In the South African context, it's actually pretty commonplace that youngsters are, if not orphaned, they're perhaps home alone or being brought up by grandparents in a very similar way.
Children-led households in South
Absolutely.
Africa, yes.
Absolutely. So I think what it taught me was really that the adults that are participating in the economy need to be engaged, need to be looking to the youngsters in our society and finding ways to help them to progress. And the conversation, I think, that you are referring to is around showing that there's an understanding, but also very much the experience that I had was that, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
You can either react to it and feel forlorn or downtrodden, or use it as an excuse, as I was saying earlier on, or it can really drive one forward with an energy.
Energize you into something
absolutely
positive. What book have you read this year thus far, and why are you going to tell me about it? What impression did it leave?
It left a huge impression. In fact, over the summer holidays, I was reading Time magazine, and Bill Gates every year does a list of 5 books that over the year have been pivotal in his life. And I was flicking through, and one of his books is a book called Meditation and Mindfulness by Andy Puddicombe. And he just said that having read the book, it's really changed his life and his perspective. And it was another one of those, the universe moving in interesting ways, that I went to Bangalore in January this year to attend an ashram for a week and to learn how to meditate.
Gosh, and I should try that.
I'll tell you what, it's amazing.
My mind can take a break.
Well, it's very, very important.
Yes.
It is very important. So last year, IQ Business won the Conscious Companies Awards. And the prize...
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But the prize was that the CEO would be sent to an ashram for a week, for a week of spiritual focus.
That's a nice award.
Oh, it's great. It was amazing. Vegetarian food, treatments and therapies, and learning.
That's my life.
Well, it is.
That's like my treatments and therapies.
Well, it was a profound experience. It really was. I actually went with the winner of the NGO category, Mark Lubner, the CEO of Africa Tickham, who's just an amazing individual.
Yes, he is.
My
he
wife
has spoken
and Mark's
at
partner.
some of my seminars.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Amazing guy. Yeah.
And we had the experience together with Brenda Carley, the CEO of Conscious Companies. And the book had really teed me up. In fact, Brenda said to me, throw the book away. She said, don't bother with the book. You're going to have the real experience. And it really was an amazing experience.
Has it changed your life?
It has, yeah, very much.
Wow, that's something. Okay, on my bucket list, I'm adding that now.
You have to,
Okay. What do you desire to leave as a legacy, both encompassing your career and personal life?
Well, I feel I'm on a bit of a journey at this point, and I'm not at the legacy stage yet. That's a long time.
But you're building it as you're going.
Yeah, and I tend to have a view that I want to be happy in what I'm doing. But I'm not sure I will ever be contented. And that legacy moment, perhaps the contentment might happen, that scene of being on my deathbed, surrounded by my loved ones. And hopefully at that point, I'll be able to say, I feel contented.
Yeah.
I don't really want to feel contented along the way.
Because you just relax then.
Yeah,
you're not as driven.
Absolutely, there's more to do. And what we're really trying to do with, this chapter of my life at IQ Business is one that I really hope is going to go on for many, many years. And the legacy is around really achieving our vision and our purpose.
What is your vision?
Our vision is to be the leading independent management consulting firm in Africa.
In Africa?
In Africa. We believe it's high time that Africa had its own business services capability, that we shouldn't be so dependent on the international firms that are here.
We understand our environment better.
Yeah.
We think. Yeah.
So that's the focus. That's the desire to really build something of great significance.
Yeah. Are you operating in any of the countries at the moment?
We are. We're operating in Kenya, in Ghana, and in Mauritius at the moment.
Great. Well done. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
What's the most courageous decision you've taken so far in your life?
The one thing I think can only pop to mind there. I mean, I'm now, this is my 10th year at IQ Business, and I spent 10 years in listed companies in South Africa and 10 years in consulting in my formative years. So in my 30th year, and I reflect back over those 30 years, the most courageous moments really came about 8 years ago when I moved from being an employee to an owner.
Wow.
And the most courageous decision, I think, is actually to transition from working in corporates or working in a business environment and being an employee to being an owner.
Yeah.
And that requires
responsibility.
It's a big step. It's not something that one can do. When I go home and say to my wife, we're bonding the house, and she says, well, why are we doing that? Well, because I want to invest in my company, or taking that serious step of putting skin in the game, is the most courageous thing, I think, in terms of a career, whether it's starting a new business or buying into a business in the way that I did with IQ Business. It's a very, very important pivotal point in one's career. Not everybody is prepared to do it and shouldn't perhaps take that step, but I found it to be a really important step.
And you sleep well at night?
I sleep like a baby, much to my wife's annoyance. I take, when my head hits the pillow, if I make it to 30 seconds before I'm asleep, that's unusual.
You are lucky.
I'm out in a flash. I tend to wake up very early in the morning. I tend to be awake by 4 o'clock in the morning, but I don't have to set an alarm. That's when I wake up. And that's when my mind really starts going. But I sleep well.
Yeah, one day. Even as a child, I've never been able to, so it's fine. I've made peace with it. In the Sunday Times last year, on the 4th of February, you said the state capture inquiry is a perfect opportunity for South Africa to do the right thing. What did you mean?
I reflect at the moment as I watch the process at the Zondo Commission that I have this feeling of déjà vu, that it's very similar to the TRC that we experienced in the late 1990s. The parallel, though, is that the TRC really focused, of course, on the crimes against humanity, the appalling apartheid regime and the effect that had on the lives of so many. The Zondo Commission I consider to be TRC 2.0, but the focus is no longer on crimes against humanity, but it's the crimes of corruption and corrupt business practice or corrupt state capture. But I think it has a very similar effect. The interesting thing is that I think we were much more forgiving in the first iteration than we are now. And there's something in the human spirit that finds, and maybe it's a degree of jealousy, or there's a degree of, I don't know what the factor is, but when we see that people have gained wealth or that they have benefited from the corrupt practices that are being exposed in the Zondo Commission, there's a real drive to see these people put in jail. We didn't see that in the first TRC. I think we've got to learn from this developmental cycle that we're in. I'm not saying that we should simply forgive. I think at a minimum we should expose the process that has taken place in South Africa. And by the way, it's not just limited to here. It's an international network of crime that has found a soft spot here to really focus and develop ill-gotten gains here. So that's really the motive, I think, that inspired the article that I wrote earlier this year.
But also it is impugning human dignity, because when all those billions are wasted, it is inexcusable for Africans to still be living in the way they're living.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's one of the richest countries in the world.
Yeah.
55 million people.
Yeah.
No excuse.
If you have a job here in South Africa, your standard of living is far higher in general than other places around the world.
Yeah.
But the problem is not very many people have a job here, and we have massive youth unemployment and challenges to
So just
to
imagine if we had free education since 1994, and we focused on STEM education, how far we could have been.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
So those are the things for me that make me angry.
Oh, we should all be angry about it, but we should all be doing something now about it. And I would like to suggest that we're all complicit to some extent in how we got here.
This is why you can't point fingers, because there's no way 10 years would have passed us by without us not. It's actually an article that I'm working on, but I'm finding it difficult to articulate it. But anyway, what suggestion would you give to people who want to help each other? We're just speaking now about corruption. Whether you're in the public sector or private sector, how do you help people, give them a leg up without falling foul of corrupt practices?
Well, there's a real change that is happening not only in South Africa but around the world, which is coming from a movement called the B Corporation movement. And B Corporation, so IQ Business is a B Corporation, and being a B Corporation is not one less than an A Corporation. It's actually, B stands for better. It's really a new cycle, a new focus that has taken great momentum from people like Sir Richard Branson or Ratan Tata or Dr. Mo Ibrahim. There are 28 global leaders who have come together over the years to really look at ways that we can catalyze a new form of capitalism. It might sound a bit idealistic, but as a B Corporation, our role is to look beyond the profit motive in our business, to look at how we can impact the society and the environment and the general economy that we operate in. And I think the challenges that we face in South Africa really warrant business getting engaged and involved and partnering with government, partnering with civil society to tackle those challenges. And there are very small things that can be done by individuals as individual citizens, or there are much greater things that small, medium enterprises can be involved with, or for that matter, the major corporations in South Africa can get engaged with.
It is a tough one, because you do want to help people, or you also want help, but people then say, oh, I know you, that's going to be called conflict of interest.
Well, it potentially can. And we've seen many situations where individuals have been very self-centered in their transactions or in their motive, as opposed to really thinking about the society or the environment that they're operating in. We've seen so many issues, I think, coming to the fore, and we have to stop that. We have to draw a line, and if individuals are choosing to be in government, then they must be in government. They cannot straddle the line between government and business.
And have business interests in line.
Absolutely.
And funneling all the
Absolutely.
business to those companies.
Yeah.
Yep, South Africa, we're in an interesting time. When you first came to South Africa, you mentioned that you had somebody that you did an MBA with.
Yes.
But outside of that, how did you build networks? You know, sometimes when you come into virgin territory, can we call it, how do you start constructing and building a life and networks so that you can thrive in this environment?
It's always a challenge, I think, moving to a new country.
Yeah.
And there's so many new things, new ways to learn there. I think firstly one must just be open to new experiences and have an open mind to get out of one's comfort zone.
Not always saying, oh, we wouldn't do that in the UK.
No,
We do not appreciate comments like that.
No, exactly. And if I think to some of the initial relationships that I made, some of the reason why we stayed in Johannesburg was because of the people.
Yeah. Oh no, we are nice,
amazing,
aren't we?
Amazing. I mean, just
despite what is said about our country, we really are amazing
very
human
much.
beings.
And there's a big difference, as we know, between Johannesburg and Cape Town. And there's a big difference between the people.
There is.
There is a big difference, very much. And we found it so easy to make friends that clients that I met at the time invited me to their homes for a braai. I've got some.
We're good at that.
Well, just amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing. I mean, in London, everybody's so insular and sitting on the tube train with their newspaper folded so
Which
that
I
they don't
find fascinating,
interrupt.
how people can be sleeping and then they know exactly when to get up.
They do. Yeah, they're programmed. They know. Nobody will wake you up and
they're
tell
just
you.
like,
They won't help you. But so you're on your own.
Yes.
In Johannesburg, they'd help you.
Yes,
they would say, isn't this your stop?
Especially if they're familiar with you. Yeah.
So firstly, I think the people really, really very special. Secondly, my wife, who is just very outgoing and part of my network, of course, came from working as a tag team with my wife, and that she was really great at getting connected and meeting the neighbours and being interested. And she was working at the time as well. And then thirdly, what's happened over time is with our kids. That don't underestimate the network that comes through one's children. all the way through their education career, because we're all in it together as parents. It's not easy. It's not an easy process, but being able to connect with parents and build a network through children is just an amazing process.
Which I always found fascinating in the BE space in South Africa, how people will go and target strangers to be partners instead of people they go to church with or networks, because you should be sharing similar values with those people than a total stranger. And then we shocked that our partnerships are not working. Have you kind of tapped into that kind of thinking when you think about your business relationships? Because isn't it about values ultimately?
Absolutely has to. And I think sometimes we try to look too far when actually people that are far closer to us, where there is a chemistry and understanding, and as you say, a value system or a value set. Which but
really we're just trying to get connected people to get us through the door, and then we worry about corruption. You are said to be an ardent lobbyist for government and business collaboration. Why?
Well, it goes back to the B Corporation.
Is that where it comes from?
Well, it's something that's built up over time, that if we look at the challenges that government is facing in South Africa, that if we're really honest, they completely are overwhelmed by whether it's the education crisis that we face or the housing issues that are there, or the state-owned enterprises and the issues that we face there. We cannot, as business, lager the wagons. That's what happened in Zimbabwe. That's the mentality. In fact, there was an unplayable government in Zimbabwe, and business basically said, well, let's just keep doing business together and we'll be okay. Well, look at what's happened in the economy and the society there. So at our peril should we do that. We have to, as business, as civil society and as government, come together. We have to seek ways to align our agendas to a common purpose and to a common outcome, and really work effectively. And there are a number of initiatives at the moment, things like the PPGI, the Public-Private Growth Initiative, that is actually working under the radar to some extent, that really I think is going to forge closer links and relationships within each of the business sectors that we operate in South Africa.
Well, that's a good mindset, because we've always thought that business and political leaders come from different ideologies and they can never speak to each other, they speak past each other.
Yeah, they do, but I feel very strongly if you're in a leadership role in business, then you have to be, by default, an activist. That stepping back and perhaps drawing a line and saying that politics cannot come into a business environment.
And politics is a way of life. How do you exclude yourself from life?
Absolutely. And we're probably, I think, at this point in our young democracy, we are in a situation where the political dynamic has the greatest charge it ever has. And as we've seen, there's lots of infighting and dynamics between the political parties, but we've got to understand how we can collectively come together to drive economic growth. Without that, then we have a very troubled future.
Yeah, we can't keep on growing at 1%, 1.2.
Oh gosh, no.
It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
You believe that the key ingredient to drive an inclusive future for all South Africans is education. I just came across something. The University of Kansas in the US now offers a class called Angry White Male Studies, which explores the sources of this emotional state since the 1950s in America and Britain. I know you don't know too much about the course content, but what's your visceral reaction to such a course in the context of transformation in South Africa?
Well, it conjures up all sorts of thoughts. I mean, in Kansas, of all places. I mean, I wonder in the course, as part of the course, do they put white pillowcases?
We shall not go there.
On,
yeah.
But I can understand why we have and we see around the world angry white males, because let's face it, white males are the most privileged individuals in the global economy.
Really, even when they're orphans?
Absolutely. And that's a privilege. There's a huge amount of history, I think, behind that. And the anger perhaps comes from the threat or the change that we see happening around the world. But being angry is a very negative state of energy, I think, and we have to find ways. Perhaps the course is seeking to do this, to harness that energy in a positive direction, and embracing diversity and engaging on the journey or the change that is taking place, I think, is really what excites me as a happy white male.
Because I'm always fascinated. What is so threatening about the rest of us? Why?
Well, because it represents a change, the privilege.
So it's just the change. It's just
I think that's a major driver.
Yeah.
I think there's always a fear of unknown. There's a prejudice that comes through whether it's a religious barrier, a racial barrier, a gender barrier. There is a prejudice that comes about, which is made up of a bias, which can be either conscious or unconscious. It's almost baked into how we're brought up in our families, in our communities, in the societies that we participate in. And anything that is seen as different to that is a threat initially. And I think that's where some of the negative energy really erupts from, and that's what we've got to get over and embrace the learning opportunity and the
discomfort of something new.
Absolutely.
Because from there, isn't that where creativity and innovation comes in?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, maybe you should be a guest speaker at the course, but anyway, we have to wrap up now. Is there some wisdom you want to leave us with? Just in general, anything that you want us to remember you by?
Well, the people that I'm working with at the moment, whether they are my colleagues at IQ Business, my clients, our clients out in the marketplace, or indeed our competitors in the South African marketplace, one of the things that I'm really pushing hard at the moment is to deal with what I would call the inferiority complex in South Africa. That we were a closed market for so many years, and indeed over the last 25 years we've been very inwardly focused in dealing with our own challenges and opportunities here. And there seems to be a view that this is almost like a Jurassic Park, that we have not progressed. The rest of the world has progressed ahead of us. And in order for us to make progress, we have to go and leverage, whether it is American, European, Indian firms, to bring their knowledge and experience into our marketplace. And the situation really couldn't be further from that perspective. And that we've got to really back ourselves. We have a cottage industry of many consulting companies here that have expertise that is world class. And indeed, we're working in London, in Hong Kong at the moment, and I mentioned some of the African countries. Last year we did a project in South Korea. We're following in the footsteps of whether it's South African breweries and being one of the most successful companies in the world, or Discovery with the Vitality program, which is taking the world by storm. Things happen here in a way
that we can export.
Oh, we absolutely can. We've got to back ourselves.
I know that. I love that. I really believe that we undermine ourselves.
We do.
Well, I'm happy. I hope they will listen coming from you.
Great.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this. We could go on for another few hours. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi. I hope you enjoy that. And remember to catch us on our YouTube channel. Just subscribe and you will catch us every month. Thank you.